without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Galib Hossain.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you all today. My name is Galib Hossain, as I said. As my friend over here said, it's nice to be here in the Philippines, here after about 10 years. And I've been having a good time here, meeting the people, and it's been quite a lovely trip so far. I would like to start off by thanking Dr. Vago for making this happen, and special thanks to Ms. Joan for putting up with me and dealing with my texts and emails about also making this happen. So this is the organization I represent today. It's called LAMG China Education Training Promotion Alliance. So a little bit about the company. We are actually the education and training wing of the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which was established in '89 by the Prime Minister of Laos. And after the Chamber of Commerce established its first office in China, we started dealing with a lot of foreign investment. But when we dealt with foreign investment in different countries, we saw something in common, which was the workforce was not up to par as what the investors were wanting. So we decided to form LCETPA, as we call it. So since then, we've come a long way since 2018. We have an international team of 30 staffers, representative offices, and we continue our pursuit of developing TVET, not just in Southeast Asian countries, but also across the world. We're planning to expand to the Middle East this year as well, and regions in North Africa. Okay, so now our history of international cooperation. Domestically in China, we have partnerships with over 200 vocational colleges, higher education institutes, private companies, and different government bodies, because the local government is quite prevalent in China. So when you are working with industries and working with schools, you often also have to work with them and adhere to their policies. So we have developed a network um, that is quite vast in China. And in the time since 2018, we have trained over 5,000 students, teachers, and government officials in different programs. And in terms of international collaboration, we do primarily focus on Southeast Asian countries. And we are affiliated with over 100 schools, international organizations like SEAMEO INNOTECH, for example, starting from today, SEAMEO INNOTECH, I hope, and as well as different ministries and government agencies. So our primary goal is to expand TVET and make sure it meets industry needs, because our primary concern is education industry integration. And we have found, following and learning from China's policies, how it comes to fruition in ways that exceed our expectation. So we have done this in through many ways, which I will explain later. And here is our team. They couldn't be here today. They're also traveling on business in different countries, but you will be meeting them soon, hopefully in China as well as here in Philippines. So this is our chairman, Mr. Alan Yang. His better half, who is also the Secretary General, her name is Jet Fei, and I am in charge of international and legal affairs. Now, here are the services we primarily provide, and one that concerns not just education institutes, but government organizations as well. The first is we develop industry skills framework. We have done this just in Laos, for example. They did not have that in the country, and since they're the newest member of ASEAN, it was imperative that we develop this. And they've been very helpful. Their Department of Skills Development, it's in Portuguese, but the abbreviation is INDMO. They are our strategic partners, and we've co-developed this with Chinese academics and INMO in Timor-Leste. We have also developed occupational standards for them as well as Laos. Right now, we're working with the Ministry of Human Resources in Malaysia to do the same for them in newer technologies. And also in the Philippines, some stuff has been done for particularly the EV industry when it comes to occupational standards and curriculum development. But what we would like to do is to make sure it can be implemented and modify whatever needs to be modified in the Philippines context. Then it's curriculum development, which is self-explanatory, and then training and capacity building. Usually, this is what we start any sort of collaboration with. It is the easiest thing to do. We start off with short-term training. We can do it here in the host country by sending expert academics from China to teach the students and train the trainers over here as well. And but what we find our foreign partners more interested in is learning it in China as well. So we host them for about a week or 2 weeks, where they are staying at a local vocational and technical school, where their trainers firsthand are trained. And we focus not just on the theoretical part, but hands-on skills. That is the primary focus, to make sure we utilize the facilities and the teachers know how to implement it when they go back to their own countries. And then we, of course, organize events, which comes in the form of symposiums most of the time and conferences where we get together government officials, private companies, public companies, institutes like SEAMEO INNOTECH, SEAMEO VOTECH, and everybody speaks, networks, shares their experience, talk about what they wish to collaborate on, and we usually meet somewhere in the middle. And these events have been quite fruitful for us. Then we also do teacher and student exchange. We do this with higher education institutes as well. And it also comes in the form of joint programs. So when there are joint programs, let's say some students or teachers will go to another country, they'll stay there 3 months, 6 months, depending on what the schools want. And you build this long-term relationship that lasts between two institutes that can work together and develop from there. Then we also do education digitization and equipment procurement. So as we move more towards hybrid learning, it is very important to meet those standards as well. It can come in the form of using a proper LMS, also using VR technology. For example, we just worked on an EV training program in a place where they don't quite have the funding or access to EV cars and all the lab equipment that is needed. So what we did was we provided them with VR technology, which helped them kind of simulate that scenario, and the students learned how to work with those equipments and what to do. Then is workforce recruitment. This also falls more under the umbrella of the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Chongqing. So when we do work with Chinese investors particularly, they do want a skilled workforce to go with. It is something that is almost non-negotiable. So we do help using our networks from different places, allocate to start with a small group of skilled workers that can set the tone and the work culture, and at least on a supervisory level, make sure everything goes according to plan. So our notable achievements in the China ASEAN Education Cooperation Week, which is the largest ASEAN event in China, we've had 5 of our flagship projects recognized and awarded. Also last year, we developed the China-Laos Vocational Standards Development Project. And then we developed, as I mentioned earlier, the Industry Skills Framework and Occupational Standard and TVET program standards for Timor-Leste. We also are endorsed by the Ministry of Education and Sports of Laos, as well as the Lao Embassy in China. And also our first SEAMEO partner is SEAMEO INNOTECH. We've worked with them very closely. I was just there about 4 days ago, and we have a long and fruitful history of cooperation. These are some of the news articles that have been published about our cooperation. This is the signing ceremony with INMO, with VOTEC. This is for the EV Training Center in Laos. This is with the German Malaysian Institute in Malaysia. And this is the unveiling ceremony of the Industry Skills and Occupational Standard Framework in Timor-Leste. Now, concerning today, the main thing I do want to highlight is how we can strengthen the EV cooperation via TVET and workforce development between China and Philippines. And what we will learn today is that it just doesn't apply to the Philippines. It also applies to the greater Southeast Asian region. Now, when we do look at the Chinese EV market, everything kind of seems like it happened all of a sudden. Before, we had this perception of Chinese EVs. Oh, you buy this, it'll break down. And turns out that is not the case. But the planning that went on to the success of EVs, it started way early. It started in the early 2000s. Here, if we take a look at the infographics, you can see in 2014, the United States and Europe were both selling a higher number of EVs than China. But within a year, in 2015, China superseded both of them. And then in 16, 17, and 18, the growth was drastic. Now, how did this happen? First, in the early 2000s, this is on a national level, the government created a project called the New Energy Vehicle Strategy. So they started to slowly grow this industry. They understood that, like most modern economies, including the USA, a big part of the national success and economic development was tied to the automotive industry. And EVs were going to be the automotive industry of the future that can help China grow significantly. And then in 2010 to 15, during this time, they went full force. They subsidized programs, they did industry education integration, they marketed it online, their quality assurance became incredible. Then from 2016 to 2020, this is when we became more familiar with these brands. BYD, now the largest EV company in the world, NIO, XPeng, also known as Xiaopeng, and Chang'an, which is the local company in Chongqing where I'm based, and we have a partnership with them. So this is when all these brands started expanding and started gaining global recognition. And then from 2021 to 2025, this is when Chinese market, the EV market kind of became completely dominant, where even the German and Japanese companies now couldn't compete with them. In fact, Toyota shelved their EV project altogether and focused on hydrogen engines because they couldn't compete. And now BMW and Mercedes now face the same issue, where they cannot compete with price or quality at the moment. So now we take a look at 2025, where the EV sector is now. So now almost 70% of global EV production and 60% of global EV sales are accounted for by China. Also, in the domestic market, if you look at it, in September 2025, according to latest data, 1.6 million cars were registered. So it's not just internationally their business is booming, but domestically they have a lot of incentives to go clean, to prioritize clean energy and switch to EVs. And the Chinese EV market is not just stopping there. is projected to grow by CAGR 18.4% within the next 5 years. So now that China is in the place where it is now with their EV industry, we can take a look at their strengths and what we can learn from them and what we can utilize in our respective countries. The first thing they did right is they understood the supply chain and make sure it is robust. So this means that the batteries, semiconductors, the logistics used by the EV manufacturers, they are all cohesive, they are cost efficient, and they meet the demands of the region. Two is cost competitiveness. Because they understood and did their due research and did everything that needed to be done to allocate the resources that was needed for batteries and semiconductors, for example, they can now compete and do much better than their German and Japanese counterparts. The third is what we are all primarily concerned about, which is industry education integration. So what happened was these schools, the vocational and training schools, in China, it is quite different than in other places, where TVET is tied specifically to these institutes. They specialize in TVET and often in specific sectors. So, which I will talk about in the next slide. Fourth is policy support. So because it is a centralized government, these do come to fruition and get promulgated pretty fast and get implemented very fast. So these government incentives and establishing nationalized standards, this helped create a sense of stability and quality in China that they kind of leveraged to be in the place where they are in now. So now we also take a look at their workforce and skills ecosystem. So just in 2005, China launched an initiative that specializes development of skilled human resources of EV industries. Now they've done a really good job in China doing that. But as their companies are expanding outwards, they also want to do this in other countries to make sure their production, their economic goals, their business goals, they meet their expectations. Number two is what I was talking about earlier, making sure that the TVET colleges specialize in certain things like maintenance, mechatronics, software engineering, specifically for EVs. They built up these institutes and upgraded them in ways where they meet the workforce demands, where they meet Industry 4.0 goals. And these institutes don't just work with the EV companies, they also cooperate with local governments, ministries, and other vocational institutes in other regions and other countries. So, for example, one of our partners, Chongqing Industry Polytechnic College, is very well funded. They get funds from the government, they get funds from us, they get funds from the EV companies as well. So they provide diploma courses specifically in EV technology. So what happens when their students graduate is immediately after they graduate, they end up working for these companies like Chang'an, Volkswagen, BMW, and Tesla. And this is very important across in the Southeast Asian region. This is very important for the success of the EV industry and also the TVET sector. Now we take a look at the EV landscape of the Philippines. Firstly, it's obviously an emerging market where demand is growing. Projections indicate that 20,000 units will be sold in 2025, which is a drastic change from the 4,000 vehicles that were sold in 2024. And the government is also doing its part. They created the EV Industry Development Act in 2022, which provides tax incentives, subsidies, and cooperation between different government agencies. And the EV companies here are BYD, Tesla, Jayco, and Jetor, with more Chinese companies now willing to join. Now that we are seeing the rise of demand, it also creates a demand for technicians, assemblers, electricians, software engineers in Philippines. So what are we going to do about it? That is our responsibility to meet these demands. So there is a huge opportunity, not just for the industry, but for us here who are in the education sector. What can we do to create this situation and where we are all successful in our goals? Well, we can do, if you look at bullet point 2, we can start off with training and we can start off small. So this means we utilize the resources that are being offered by the Chinese schools and their lawmakers, where you can train up to the Chinese standards, which is the gold standard right now. You can train, first of all, your trainers. They are the ones who will be training the Filipino students. So for them to understand the curriculum, for them to understand what works, that is crucial to the success. Second is technology transfer, which will honestly happen by itself if the first thing goes according to plan. Third is infrastructure. Charging stations are extremely important. If you go to any parking lot in China, including the residential buildings, you will see charging stations. In fact, one of my friends, he is one of the dealers for Chang'an Auto. So they just expanded to Senegal. So what they did was, because Senegal has limited funds, they used old charging stations that were used in Chongqing, and they sold that to the government over there, so they can expand the EV charging stations. Because if you do not have charging stations and if you do not have decent after sales, there is no way your industry is going to grow. Another point is manufacturing and assembly. Because Philippines is in a strategic location and the labor costs are quite low, a lot of companies do want to set up assembly plants here, like they do in Mexico, for example. And the supply chain integration that also bleeds into this. So this is something we can learn from, and this will be all keys to the success of Philippines EV industry. Now, for the strategic rationale, we all both understand the positioning of Philippines and China. Philippines benefits from China's mature EV industry, which China is willing to help with, and China benefits from the Southeast Asia market and diversifying their portfolio and their supply chain. So, another point we face is, now that the world is shifting towards EVs, we need to focus also on just transition to make sure thousands of people don't just lose their jobs in a day, like we fear with the emergence of AI and automation as well. What happens to these people? We can't just abandon them. They also need to be trained, and this will require government intervention and education institutes also being on the same page with them. So Philippines could create 300,000 renewable energy jobs by 2030, most of which would be EV-related industries. So since up to 138,000 jobs related to internal combustion engines, so your run-of-the-mill mechanics who fix Toyotas, BMWs, Nissans, they have no knowledge on how to fix EV cars. So this is something we must well prepare for. Now, in terms of collaboration with LCETPA and what we can do with both Innotech and also the education institutes in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, what we can first do in the Philippine context is we can develop national standards for training and TVET education in the EV industry. We can establish training centers like we did in Laos. We can help facilitate the development of charging stations in the Philippines. We can help facilitate battery manufacturing and raw materials processing in the Philippines. So you can not just compete on the EV industry, but also compete on the battery industry. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, assembly. This is primarily for the manufacturing sector. So all these things are crucial for not just the EV sector, but Philippines' overall economy and its education sector. If it's done right, Philippines can exceed the expectations that are put towards other countries in the region as well. It can position itself as a leader in the EV industry. Now I will give you an example of a 6-day EV training course, like a short training course. We designed this for Sarawak Skills. They're a skill center in Malaysia. They also develop national standards and work with the ministry and enterprises. So here is just 6 days, but it's focused on hands-on training because usually what we do is we create hybrid programs for this. So theories are usually taught online. So let's say for 7 days we get the theory part done. We train the trainers, we take their questions, we take their remarks, and we also put that into note when it comes to their hands-on training. So on day one, they are introduced to the structure of electric vehicles and high voltage power off procedures. This is also theoretical, but on an easier level, we understand how these things apply on a hands-on approach on the first day. It's more of an introduction. On day two, they are taught maintenance operations and thermal management system of EVs. On day three, this is a very important training. Actually, just the day three thing can also be expanded into 7 days because this is a highly technical skill that is very important, which is battery pack assembly, disassembly, and internal structure demonstration. Day four, this is also battery management systems. So we understand the working principles and their real life applicability. Because, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I did not like EVs. I am very traditional when it comes to cars. I like cars. I don't like that they don't make noise. I was very skeptical of them, just in general, particularly when it came to the batteries. A battery can last 10 to 12 years, but once that battery goes out, the cost of replacement is the same as buying a new car. But of course, in the past few years, that has changed drastically, particularly for Chinese EV companies. They have allocated cobalt and other related materials, which makes them um, very competitive when it comes to other countries and other companies. So, battery management systems is very important. Especially, let's say, if a company like Xiaomi comes to Philippines, they have their own battery company as well. So they make their own batteries. They don't buy it from somewhere else. So it is very important to understand how their BMS works. And we create training programs specifically for the companies or specifically for the demand of whichever country. So day five is drive systems and fault diagnosis, also very important for after sale service. And day six, this is optional, but we are quite passionate about this. It's mostly has to do with entrepreneurship. So when we do train our students in mechanics, we do expect them to work for companies or some dealerships. But what if they are capable of more than that? What if they're capable of establishing their own garages, their own repair shops, their own service centers? So we also teach them how to run a business in this sector and the necessary skills they would need. So that is basically the summation of a short-term training program that we use, the last one. Of course, these are all modifiable because, as I said, we work with over 200 schools in China and we work with companies. So both sides tell us what they want, and we can meet in a place where both those things can come to life. So we can create tailored training programs for specific industries. We've done this with multiple industries, including something as simple as tourism as well. And the same structure applies to a lot of different industries as well. So I think I have pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover today. And I look forward to hearing your remarks and answering your questions. And also me asking some questions to you because I am quite interested in the education sector in the Philippines, and how industry and education meet, and where their goals converge and diverge. So thank you for having me. It's been lovely being here.